They claim to be the oldest tourist attraction in the UK. They've been going 400 years. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But the main interest is the dripping well, which basically petrifies anything that it comes into contact with over a period of time.
I think 57 people died and over 200 houses destroyed. And of course, massive hot mud and rock tsunamis and floods and rivers occurred. This old bridge and whole areas were covered in these volcanic rivers. But what's the key to strata from this eruption? What's the link? What's the key? The key is after the Mount St. Helens eruptions and mudslides in the 1980s, geological layers of strata were formed really fast. The layers didn't form in millions of years how the elite want us to believe.
The inner handle underwent the carbonization process. The hammerhead was constructed with iron purity, and this is only possible with modern-day technology, according to research by Metallurgical Institute of Columbia. According to analysis, the head of the hammer consists of 97% pure iron, 2% chlorine, and 1% sulfur. This curious artifact was discovered in the city of London, Texas, USA, in 1934. The hammer appeared embedded inside a rock, and since its discovery, there have been many theories about its origin, and most importantly, its incredible age. So how did this hammer end up embedded inside the rock? Well, for the hammer to finish inside the rock, it had to have been built before the rock was formed, and that would be several million years ago, according to Live Science. After its discovery, and due to all the questions the hammer raised, researchers decided to abandon this incredible discovery in the Somerville Museum in Texas. According to studies of the Metallurgical Institute of Columbia, the inside handle underwent the process of carbonization. The head of the hammer was built with an iron purity only achievable with modern-day technology. Surprisingly, research also found that the iron had undergone a process of purification and hardening, typical of metallurgy of the 20th century. According to analysis, the rock encasing of the hammer was dated to the Ordovician era, more than 400 million years ago. The portion of the stone surrounding the hammerhead also presented abnormalities, seeming to have merged with some type of sheath covering the hammer. According to geologists, the slow process of petrification dated back hundreds of millions of years. This has left several researchers to a quick deduction of the context of the incredible discovery, leading them to assume not only that there was human civilization before the historical process of petrification in Texas, but that this ancient civilization already possessed the necessary technology for the fabrication of hammer with modern features. The chemical analysis of the artifact also detected certain amounts of potassium, silicon, chlorine, calcium, and sulfur. Thus, this composition contradicts the hypothesis postulated that the hammerhead belonged to the fragment of a meteorite, since the bodies of our solar system do not have that type of chemical composition. Researchers also believe that since the head of the hammer was found embedded into the rock, it suggests that the embedding process was performed under different atmospheric conditions to the current. Different atmospheric pressure, most similar to those in the remote past. Unfortunately, some scientists do not agree with the theory that ancient civilization created the hammer, and claim that it was only a metallurgical technique that had been eventually abandoned. Whether the artifact is indeed a hammer dating back hundreds of millions of years is something that will fuel debate among supporters of the ancient theories and conventional archaeologists, who both have provided arguments explaining the origin and the age of the hammer.
So knowing what we know and what I've shown you throughout this video, I'm pretty certain we can work out what actually the truth and real story about this hammer is. And this is just a classic example of pretty much what goes on in geology every single day, and this is the sort of stuff they will pass off as like millions of years old without really giving a credible explanation, when if you look at the other side of the evidence of how long petrification actually takes and the evidence that I've already shown you, it doesn't actually take that long. And why do they not look at these? Why do they ignore this evidence and portray the fact that these things take thousands and millions of years? And the reason I believe they do this is to hide our true history. And again, I will be going into more detail on that hypothesis, but if you were to accept the evidence which I'm showing in this video as fact, it then brings into question everything else that's been buried, all the stuff on the Jurassic coast, which I might add I will be showing you lots and lots of during this video because I live on the Jurassic coast. And it brings into question when these things were buried, when these things were petrified. That it will then start bringing up questions of, was there a flood? When was the destruction? You can see where I'm going with it. So one of the last things I wanted to delve into on this particular part of the video series, as in rapid petrification, is Mother Shipton's Cave, which is in Knaresborough, Yorkshire, I believe, in the UK. And this particular place is not unique in any way. There is quite a few of these places around the world. I know there's a few in the UK, for example, but this place, Mother Shipton's Cave, quite a lot of it's a really big tourist attraction. They claim to be the oldest tourist attraction in the UK. They've been going 400 years. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But the main interest is the dripping well, which basically petrifies anything that it comes into contact with over a period of time. And people go there and they put their items in there, and I'm assuming they'll come back in a couple of years and have a look at their progress. Because of the mineral content that is in the water and is coming down on these items, it's basically petrifying anything it comes into contact with. And like I mentioned, this is not unique to Knaresborough in Yorkshire. There's many of these places across the world. And again, it just points out the fact that things can be turned to stone in many different ways. This will be slightly different because I'm assuming in a couple of years' time, when you come back to these items, for example, if you crack open the teddy bear, I'm pretty sure that the inside is still going to be soft, but there is many ways that things can be petrified and turned to stone. So if you remember what the mainstream geologists were claiming this hammer and bit of rock was, I mean, if you just look at the dripping well, it just gives a really simple explanation. So again, you have to ask the question, well, why aren't these quite simple, verifiable facts and bits of information not taken into consideration? And again, I think it's because, and I say I will go into more detail with this and more evidence on this in regards to volcanoes as well, believe it or not. But it all ties in with what I believe to be the wiping of our old history and knowledge. I wanted to highlight another researcher who has massively influenced me throughout the years. His name is Mark Knight, better known as WaykiWayki. You can catch his stuff on Odysee because I believe he's been banned on YouTube a long time ago. But the bit of research I wanted to highlight of Mark's was regarding geology and in particular layers that are formed when volcanoes erupt, which again I will be going into a bit more detail later on in the series, because it does tie in with everything I believe and trying to decipher our true history and what has happened in the past. But here is Mark speaking.
To think humans can date something to anything over 1 million years, for me, is completely ludicrous and insane. So again, let's prove that the mainstream aging of strata is wrong and a lie. The key here lies with the Mount St. Helens volcano in Washington, in the Pacific Northwest of the USA. Its May 1980 eruption was one of the largest volcano eruptions in America in the past century.
But beneath its serene exterior, Mount St. Helens is beginning to stir. Air outside turning the sky dark. Breathing becomes almost impossible.
Okay, this was a devastating eruption. The top 1,000 feet of the volcano blew off. This is nearby forests. The reach of the ash. I think 57 people died and over 200 houses destroyed. And of course, massive hot mud and rock tsunamis and floods and rivers occurred. This whole bridge and whole areas were covered in these volcanic rivers. But what's the key to strata from this eruption? What's the link? What's the key? The key is after the Mount St. Helens eruptions and mudslides in the 1980s, geological layers of strata were formed really fast. The layers didn't form in millions of years how the elite want us to believe.